What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Rollups YouTube channel. We're here today with our guy, John, working on a really cool optimistic Oracle idea, but more like optimistic snapshot. We're going to really dive into how we can efficiently take governance on chain and kind of make it more permissionless and less kind of manual work as well. So definitely an exciting topic for you if you are a leader of a protocol, if you have participated in governance before, and you've seen some of the flaws. So yeah, we're going to dive into what they're building and educate you all on what's going on. So Rob, how you doing?
Good, man. Yeah, I'm stoked to talk to John. Special guest today. We're going to be diving into 𝗏𝗏, which it stands for Universal Market Access. Their main product is the Optimistic Oracle. Has some similarities and some differences to Chainlink, but it is a little bit more community oriented. And today we're talking about a specific application of the Optimistic Oracle for governance. So I'll pass it over to John, let him introduce himself, and let him introduce oSnap.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So like you said, 𝗏𝗏 is an optimistic oracle, and what that means is that anybody is able to make an assertion about some data, like say that this happened in the real world or this happened over on this chain. And then anybody's able to dispute that. If it's not disputed, you can use the data for whatever your smart contracts need. It's really flexible in that respect, so you're not relying on specific data feeds, which is kind of the Chainlink model. You're able to propose and execute around anything. And so oSnap is using that flexibility and taking it to DAO governance, where right now a lot of DAOs aren't particularly decentralized. They're definitely not particularly autonomous. And part of that is because they're really relying on multi-sigs. So we wanted to come up with a solution that really decentralizes DAOs, and we're meeting DAOs where they are. A lot of DAOs use Snapshot, a lot of DAOs use a safe, and you can connect the two with 𝗏𝗏 sitting in between to validate that transactions that were approved on Snapshot are able to be executed with the safe. And that can be anybody executing that. So you get rid of a lot of those kind of regulatory and centralization risks around a multi-sig. And it also makes it more efficient because it's not really fun to be a multi-sig signer. So I thought this was a really cool extension. One part of it too, it can go beyond just enforcing snapshot votes because you're able to write down natural language rules. And because disputers and voters are able to interpret those rules, you can kind of extend your written rules of your DAO in a natural way. And you're not just reliant on things that are easy to write into code. So I think it's going to be a really interesting future for DAO design once you unlock enforceable written contracts essentially on chain.
Yeah, it's something we haven't really seen just yet. I mean, the general contract and applications to governance in particular, like the one that comes right to mind is like the Arbitrum governance proposal that was put up, just over the last weekend. And they mentioned in this proposal the Security Council that they have as a 9 of 12 multi-sig signer. They also put in the proposal that the community could vote out this council entirely. So I'm curious, like how that would work, and if oSnap could kind of be the middle layer where, let's say they wanted to remove the Security Council and just execute the voice of the community. Could they do so with oSnap executing transactions in this safe?
Yeah, you definitely could. If the Security Council is basically controlled by the safe, you attach oSnap as a module on the safe, and you just pass in a transaction that changes the composition of the Security Council. So it's like any other transaction. So the way that it basically works on Snapshot is you compose your bundle of transactions, which could be like, send this NFT over here, send this ETH over here, mint some tokens there, and remove this person from the Security Council and add somebody new. Once it's voted and passes through on Snapshot, you can use 𝗏𝗏 to verify that it passed on Snapshot, because 𝗏𝗏 can see what's going on off chain because it's an oracle. And then you can just execute those transactions. And that can be anybody executing that too. So as long as it follows the written rules of your DAO, in this case, just, if it passed on Snapshot with such and such quorum and voting period, it's valid, then anybody can execute it. And that really gives you autonomy, and it really removes the reliance on the multi-sig. And you still could keep the multi-sig around. In this case, it's kind of a Security Council emergency multi-sig that isn't really meant to be used except in emergency situations. That could be still there. It's not like necessarily replacing every other system of governance that you have. You could even have on-chain voting for some specific things. But in most cases, it's just way more inclusive and it's way more efficient to be able to do off-chain voting. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, that there was like, that's what Snapshot kind of came about. That's why. It was kind of, well, it was really because there wasn't anywhere to do it without spending tons in gas. And also it just further disincentivized an already slow process and kind of tough to engage process of governance for a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if you think solutions like oSnap will further kind of incentivize governance across the border, if it's kind of a step in the right direction, and what potentially could be implemented throughout the broader kind of DeFi and governance token space to incentivize participation. Because right now I think a lot of the results and kind of actors are all large parties or people who are kind of working for the teams. So there's not exactly a massive kind of use case for people who are kind of smaller investors or who care less, if you will. So yeah, like what kind of tech or ideas or thoughts have you had about further incentivizing, off-chain governance, how to make it easier for people, how to get more people to kind of vote and be active, or at least delegate their votes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that using off-chain voting and using Snapshot's tools to create specific snapshot strategies makes it a lot easier, hopefully increases participation in governance. I think there's like a technical barrier for one, just to use a wallet like outside of Snapshot. And there's like a real fear there. I mean, there's a cost in gas, obviously, but there's also a risk that your tokens might be lost somehow in some way that you don't understand. Kind of every time that you're a normal person and you're sending a transaction and you're signing it with your private key and sending it off, like you're not a crypto expert necessarily. Like you're really, really hoping that you don't lose money from this. And off-chain voting is a lot friendlier. Like it's not just because it's cheaper, it's also safer in a lot of respects, as long as you have a way of actually enforcing that on-chain, which is where oSnap is trying to fill that gap. But I do think there's things like, for instance, let's say that you have a club, just like a real life club of people. You're introducing new people to crypto. You might give them a wallet that's loaded with some NFT that gives them some voting rights, and they don't need any tokens for gas. They can just go on Snapshot and they can participate in the club's governance using this like custom NFT, and they just have that. I think there's something really cool about that. Like you can design new governance schemes that aren't limited to what's easy to write into a smart contract. And I think we've gotten used to the idea of multi-sigs, and we've gotten used to the idea of on-chain voting tied to a specific token, because that's the easiest thing to write a smart contract for. It's geared towards code. It's not geared towards how humans would organize themselves if they had other options. It's just like, those are the easiest options to actually put into a smart contract. And then I think there's things like recurring payments, setting budgets, giving specific roles to people. You can write these in a human readable way where, as a non-technical person, you can really actively participate. You can say like, hey, like I think like these people would be good treasury managers, and I'd like to give them the ability to swap between our token and ETH and USDC, as they see fit, but only do that. That's something you could just write some sentences that describe what you'd like to see. And then you can set that up. You don't have to write code to enforce that on-chain. You can use 𝗼𝗏 to interpret the rules and enforce that on-chain. So I think it really opens it up to more people, because it's not reasonable to expect everybody to be able to manually compose transactions or write a smart contract to participate in a DAO. A DAO is really meant to be for everybody, and it's meant to, be better than like a corporation or like a nonprofit entity or some other kind of organizational method. That doesn't work if people don't understand exactly what they're doing, if they can't even read the rules.
I think we've talked about 𝗼𝗏's voting incentives a little bit in the past on this channel, but can you kind of high level talk about how 𝗼𝗏's community is able to interpret these English language non-code types of sentences and turn them into like verifiable truth on chain?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I should walk through the steps first. The way that 𝗼𝗏 works, I talked about making an assertion of some piece of data. Let's use insurance as an example. So we had some insurance protocols that are integrated with us, Cozy Finance and Sherlock, and they recently had some payouts related to the Euler hack. And for that, it's just like a written, description of like what is an insurable event. Like if Euler is hacked according to like such and such criteria, pay it out. Those are human readable. Anybody can make an assertion once it is hacked, saying like, yes, it was hacked. And then there's a challenge window where anybody can challenge that assertion, and they can take the assertor's bond. because you have to put money behind it. So there's always a financial incentive to dispute somebody if they're putting in bad data, if they're trying to do some bad action. So that's kind of the asserter disputer layer. Once there is a dispute, which is rare, because normally the asserter gets it right because of the financial incentives, it goes to a vote of all the 𝗼𝗏 token holders. And it's basically a Schelling point, secret commitment, public reveal kind of system. You've got 24 hours to submit your encrypted vote of what you think the correct answer is, like, yes or no for the Euler hack being an example. So people can't just like read what the majority answer is and then just vote with that. Like, you have to actually look at the question. And there's a lot of active discussion around that too. There's a lot of threads kind of like reading the detailed rules. And then after that, there's a reveal period. And if you voted incorrectly, like outside of the majority, outside of the Schelling point, some of your tokens get reallocated to people that voted correctly. And if you staked your 𝗼𝗏 and didn't vote at all, kind of the same situation, like you didn't do your job that you promised to do when you were staking. So, you're going to lose some of your tokens to some other people. And it's not super punitive. It's like 0.1% of the tokens that you staked. So like, it's a nice bonus for the people that show up to vote. It's definitely enough to make it worthwhile to show up and vote. I think a lot of the interesting disputes are around prediction markets, though. We have an integration with Polymarket, which drives a lot of, proposals. I mean, they'll settle like a dozen plus markets a day. And every month or so, we'll probably get a dispute. And it's around some kind of legalese sort of question. Like, the disputes are around some specific wording in the market that somebody thinks that the settlement value actually wasn't correct. So the last batch of them was about whether or not Trump would be indicted. And there was kind of a subclause in the rules of the market that references like whether or not the indictment is sealed, but it says like sealed or otherwise secret. And the market kind of hinged on this almost legal ruling that the voters have to do in their head. Like, is this really about the indictment being secret, or is it about it being sealed? And ultimately, the way those settled is the indictment is public. It was confirmed publicly. It's satisfying like the rules more so to say like, yes, this indictment was made. It's like the most common sense answer. And that's how that was resolved. But it becomes almost like a court system kind of thing. But it's this decentralized, fully open court system where anybody can participate.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, like, I mean, the optimistic oracle, to the sense, it makes sense from like just an intuition, like, okay, optimistically, these things are true unless it's disputed. And then this dispute process is like something going to the court and like a jury of like your on-chain peers almost, because you have like this 𝗼𝗏 community that's, given the evidence, they're given the rationale, and then they are voting on whether or not, they think one side or the other is true. Do you, like, what are some of the applications that you're most excited about for the optimistic oracle? Like, prediction markets are obviously getting a lot of traction. What else do you think has the potential to harness the optimistic oracle for like mass adoption?
I mean, I just really think DAO governance, I mean, obviously that's what I'm personally focused on the most right now. It's a real area where we can easily improve. So I'm hoping to see a lot of adoption of oSnap just to connect a snapshot space and a safe for the DAOs that use that kind of pattern. I think there's a lot of good reasons to do that. And then I think once it's connected, because you're able to customize your rules, I think we'll see a lot of interesting experimentation around written natural language rules and, English generally speaking right now, but, theoretically, whatever language, and being able to enforce that on chain. Like, I think that's brand new. And I think that it's something that's really necessary. Prediction markets are obviously really cool. I think there's a lot of room to expand there. There's a lot of room to expand in insurance. That's like another area where we've found a lot of product market fit. We have the Across Bridge, which we kind of built in-house at Risk Labs. So it's like our sister project, but it's independent, but uses 𝗼𝗏 under the hood to verify that cross-chain asset relays are done correctly. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with cross-chain messaging and confirmation using 𝗼𝗏, because 𝗼𝗏's power is like not just verifying real world data or interpreting rules. It can go and see what's happening on another chain somewhere and just deliver that to whatever chain the oracle is, requesting that data from, which is how Across works. And I think that there's a lot of cool stuff Across is doing soon, where you're also sending messages along with your relayed funds. So you can have direct cross-chain interactions where it's like, okay, I'm going to send 1 ETH from Optimism to Arbitrum and then swap it for USDC. And you can do that all through Across then. and 𝗼𝗏 is able to verify under the hood that, all of those things are done correctly. Because across is doing like 500 relays an hour, something crazy like that. And it's a highly technical verification process. It's really bots proposing and disputing in the across case. But I think it's really cool. And this is already a long list, but I'm excited about a lot of things. But I'm excited about real world assets too. I mean, everybody takes a crack at it. It's a lot harder to make that connection between the real world and have like some kind of real world enforceability with like on-chain penalties and rewards to kind of tether those things together. It's really hard to do through the legal system, but you can use 𝗼𝗏 to build these incentive systems on-chain about how something is managed off-chain. And I think that that can provide much better guarantees. You could even do like insurance, like if the off-chain custodian like did something wrong, you can have insurance against that eventuality happening that could run through 𝗄𝗁𝗀 or 𝗫𝗫 or anything else. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of room to explore there. And I think it's necessary because most of the stuff that's interesting is in the real world. I do think that crypto is ultimately going to be the coordination mechanism for most human activity, at least when it relates to, something with financial value. And for that, you need real world assets. There's no way around it. And you need good oracles for that.
Yeah, there's a big push right now. There's tons of projects that are bringing in real world assets on chain, which is very exciting. It's kind of what was missing last kind of DeFi came about, and it was a lot of like rehypothecation and different types of assets on chain. But yeah, bringing on real world assets to the chain really kind of changed the game for just the perception perhaps of outsiders, as well as the legitimacy of certain yields and of certain opportunities as well. Risks. It allows you to have kind of a different type of portfolio while still maintaining your kind of keys, if you will, right? Up till now, you've pretty much only been able to buy crypto assets or own crypto assets on chain, but just recently you can own a piece of a rental producing property, for example, and have proof that that it's on chain, that you own the keys, you own this kind of fractionalized token, for example, and that is yours in your wallet, and the smart contract is set to produce you this much income or this much X, Y, and Z parameter. So it's like you can get exposure to different asset classes, like for example through like Paxos Gold, while still maintaining your kind of keys, and the options become limitless. And I think it's a big narrative right now. I think there's a lot of like small cap projects that are pumping and getting excited about this, and a lot of people on Twitter I've seen are getting excited about it. So yeah, that really fits right up 𝗼𝗏's alley.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the on-chain enforceability, it's really similar to oSnap conceptually. Like if you're the custodian for something that's off-chain and you have something that's like staked on-chain, that if you misbehave, that's going to get slashed, and that'll go to compensate like the people that were affected by that if you're just not doing your job correctly. Or if you're only getting paid in a token, and that token is like not going to be valuable if you're not actually handling the asset. There's so many ways to approach it. And I am excited by like these tokenization projects that we're seeing. A lot of them still are very much like trust-based though. So I'd like to see more of them have like less reliance on trust in the custodian, the same way that you want to have less reliance on trusting the multi-sig signers to carry out the snapshot vote. You want to have like a way to penalize them on chain. And it's easier with snapshot because you can just say like, hey, like this doesn't go through unless it passes on snapshot. That's still like a purely digital kind of governance thing. Harder with real world assets, but you can put the incentives in place, I think, to make it sustainable.
Yeah, and there's more and more like assets and accounts that are coming on chain as like we tokenize everything and Ethereum becomes like the global settlement layer. We're seeing more and more enforceability that we can take on certain like accounts, certain assets. Because if your house is on chain, you can now enforce things against your house. If your bank account is on chain, you can enforce things against your bank account. So as more and more things like go on chain, 𝗼𝗏 will have more and more ways to enforce like this decentralized mechanism of preserving, whatever the function is against those accounts and those assets, because they'll have a way to either reward those who are acting truthfully or penalize against those assets of people who are acting maliciously or not not in the truth. So yeah, I think, I mean, this is just getting like more and more, it's becoming more and more important as more assets come on chain.
Yeah, for sure. And I think particularly I'm interested in seeing how the insurance space grows around this too. Because that seems like the easiest catch-all, where let's say that you're in Bangladesh and you invested $50 into like a tokenized real estate thing in America, and then it stops paying you your percentage of the rent. You're obviously not going to like go and sue them in America about it. Even if you have a legal right, you're just not going to do it. But if you have insurance around that, like, hey, if it stops paying out the rent that you're owed, you get your $50 back. You know, you feel more confident investing in that kind of thing, because legal recourse is just like, even if you have legal rights to it, which you may or may not have really, it's just not practical for you to do it as, you know, a foreign person that's not that deeply invested in it anyway. You probably just write it off. So I think for safety, you need insurance around a lot of these things.
Got it. Yeah. And there's enforceability around the assets on chain, but once you reach into like physical assets, we'll kind of have those siloed to the physical world. So like foreclosing on a house or something like that, that is something that, you know, you can only incur or get penalized for in the physical world. Yeah, what like that, you know, like Andy said, like the possibilities are limitless. And like it just gets my brain and my imagination going about like all these integration opportunities for oSnap on the governance side, and to resolve like those metrics, but then the optimistic Oracle in general to resolve like these questions that happen both in the physical world and the on-chain world. And insurance is a huge one. There's also like there's been talk about like contracts being NFTs, you know, like actually having your digital signature from your wallet sign a legally binding contract. Do you think optimistic Oracle could play a role in preserving those types of on-chain contracts, or is there a missing piece of enforceability that is in the physical world that the optimistic Oracle can't really penetrate on the on-chain world?
It's kind of like a combination. Just going back to like the insurance pattern, because I've thought about this flow a little bit. So if you have some off-chain rights to some asset, like legally it's incorporated, it's like sitting in some corporation that's supposed to manage it in a certain way and has some responsibilities to a DAO or some token holders, for instance, somebody's going to have to sue them. And the way that this works in like real estate disputes anyway, like let's say in my neighborhood, actually, there was a really big fire that kind of started and like spread to a bunch of houses. And what happens there is that really the insurance companies deal with it legally. Like they'll do a payout to the affected people, and then they're going to go to court and go and like figure out like how do they get their money back. And that same kind of pattern could apply to like an on-chain, off-chain kind of thing. And insurability is going to be a really big question. Like if the insurance provider, let's say, is saying like, yeah, I'll provide insurance if this this custodian of this gold doesn't post audits the way they're supposed to, and like isn't doing their job, or they steal the gold, like we're going to pay out the affected token holders, and then we're going to go sue them. Their ability to actually go after them legally is pretty important. So I think they're going to look at that in like the off-chain contracts. Like, is this really enforceable? Is it in a jurisdiction where we can realistically go after them? Is it going to be worth it to us? And if not, they're not going to provide insurance for it, which probably makes it less appealing to token holders because they have no reason to think that they would get paid out if something goes wrong. But it can make it really appealing to token holders if they know that they get paid out really quickly. And we've seen that with smart contract hacks. Like the insurance payouts are very fast. Like on-chain insurance payouts are so much faster than off-chain insurance payouts. And they're more aligned too. Like it's not just the insurance provider is like, no, I don't think your house really burned down that bad.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I'm from Florida, so that there was like a pretty massive hurricane that hit the west coast of Florida this past hurricane season. And like, I mean, people are living in like trailers, you know, they had houses and their houses are demolished. And there's still insurance claims happening from like 3 or 4 hurricane seasons ago, because the insurance companies are just, you know, in this dispute in the courts, they're trying to get their money. And it's so backed up that it takes years, like several years, to end up getting an insurance payout from a result of like what is a relatively common occurrence in Florida of hurricane insurance. But, you know, just the process is so inefficient that it gets bogged down and gets backed up with all of these claims. And you know, hopefully on-chain enforceability, like if we do have like this global settlement layer where a lot of like the insurance assets, whatever the collateral is for these insurance companies, are actually held on chain, then, you know, it could almost just use oSnap and the optimistic oracle. Like, did this hurricane happen? You know, did this house, you know, get wrecked? Yes. Okay. Take from the insurance provider's wallet, send to, you know, the insurance claim wallet or something like that. You know, maybe not just, you know, one transaction type simple, but it could make the process much more efficient.
It could actually be one transaction, like getting into the technical weeds. Like, let's say that it's an insurance payout and it's kind of like a self-service thing. Like, you can come and say like, hey, my house, you know, burned down, and post all your evidence on IPFS and like reference your arguments in the terms of like this contract that was written out and then shared on chain, and just say like, I'm claiming my $100,000. And the insurance company then has that challenge window to like think about it and dispute it. Or third parties could do the same too. If they're like, this looks completely fake, like I checked the news and like everything's fine, like this hurricane didn't happen, this is just a lie. Third parties can dispute that too. But in the most common case, it's probably you're telling the truth, you're saying the amount that you're owed, and the insurance company is not going to post a bond and risk it to dispute you on that if they're like, yeah, that seems right. And then you just have a callback function then on settlement where you just get your money. So you might have like a pretty long challenge window. Like, let's say you make the challenge window a week just for safety, because claims could be really big and they could be complex and people need to think about it. A week is still a lot faster than 3 years, obviously. And everybody has money on the line. It doesn't really cost the insurance company that much to just like deny. But with 𝗼𝗏, it does. And there is a bounded endpoint to it. Like, this dispute will be resolved after like a couple of days after like the challenge period.
Yeah. And is there like a dispute to the dispute, you know, like, or is it once it's done, it's done?
Boom. Like, yeah, single step escalation to the vote of all the 𝗼𝗏 token holders. So you have like a bounded kind of process. It's not continuously disputing, which I think a lot of people do find more appealing about our system. There's a couple of other optimistic oracle systems like 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 and reality.eth's escalation game, which are kind of built on like larger and larger appeals or like going to higher and higher courts. 𝗼𝗏, it's just like single step. Once there's a dispute, it goes to the highest possible court, which is the vote of all the 𝗼𝗏 token holders.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, and then it's like right away, okay, you know, what percentage would you say is disputed? Is it something like 1%, 2%? Not even not even.
It's not even close. And I would preface that by saying that across is probably like our most frequent user. Well, across and Polymarket. So the way that across works is it's doing like 500 plus relays an hour. And then the claim that it actually makes is like a bundle of all of the relayer refunds saying like all these relays on all these chains were done correctly and fees were calculated correctly. And like the refunds that were requested are supposed to go in this place. So it's like very technical and like bot driven. Across disputes, incredibly rare. At 500 relays an hour, I think you get a dispute for across maybe like once every 3 months. And that's usually like if like Infura is getting overloaded or something, like something crazy is happening on one of the chains that across touches, like Arbitrum is just going bonkers about something, and like nodes get out of sync and a bot gets confused and makes a mistake. Other cases, people have tried to attack across, which has been interesting, and they just get disputed. So they'll just be like, they'll load a wallet with Aztec Connect or Tornado Cash or something, and then be like, I'm owed a $1 million refund because I did a relay, and they get disputed in like 2 minutes by a bot. That's like, nope, that's an easy one. And then I think Polymarket's the other one. Those disputes, like I said, are more about wording. Like, they're very legalistic disputes. They're not bot driven at all. They're very manual. It's like humans reading it and thinking like, I don't know about this. But those are really rare too. I would say maybe we get a Polymarket dispute. Lately, it's been once every couple of weeks, which is more often than usual.
And because they happen so infrequently, it makes sense to escalate to the highest court right away, because there aren't a lot of disputes that happen. So you want to make sure that the ones that do happen are resolved correctly.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, you want to make sure the incentives are in place so that like the asserter is not making mistakes, that it's going to be really costly for them. I think for Polymarket, if you make an assertion and you're wrong, you're going to lose thousands of dollars. If you make an assertion and you're right, you'll make $10 as like your proposer reward. So you're incentivized to like make proposals fast, because it's like, oh, like the Indiana Pacers won the game. That's really easy to verify. That's an easy $10 if you're the first to propose, but like, don't get it wrong. Never get it wrong. You're going to like wipe out, like if you got it right 80 times in a row and got it wrong once, that's going to wipe out all of your earnings from like those 80 times in a row. And if you start seeing a lot of disputes, there's probably something wrong with, like the way that the questions are being worded, like they're too ambiguous, or the bonds aren't really set in like an ideal way, because disputes are like not the good case. Ideally, you catch everything at that asserter layer. The asserter is always right. Disputers always have a good incentive to like catch them, but disputes should stay pretty rare.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Now that you guys are, you know, you've shipped the oSnap release, what are you guys working on next?
We shipped a V2 of oSnap, like just we have like a pull request up right now with a snapshot and Zodiac. It's funny, like we started working on this a while ago, so it's like a new version of the module, which you can add to your safe, that's targeting our latest Oracle contract. We have a new Oracle dApp that's coming out probably next week, which is really improved. I mean, it's like using the new Oracle contract, obviously, but it's like just pulling in a lot more information. It's much faster, much more pleasant to use. We launched staking too. That was a huge technical challenge. So we have like a totally revamped staking system. And for me personally, I'm just like full bore focusing on these oSnap deployments, finding out what DAOs need, figuring out maybe what features we add to oSnap in the future. But we should be launching oSnap relatively soon with the Across DAO. You know, naturally, they're kind of like a sister project and very much into oSnap. We're in pretty advanced stages with Shapeshift as well, which really wants to stay decentralized. And they've used SafeSnap in the past too with Reality, and they like the idea of using 𝗏 for execution. And there's a bunch of other DAOs too, like major ones, which are interested for like regulatory or efficiency reasons. So we'll just keep pushing forward on that. It's almost like an enterprise sales cycle though. Like it takes maybe 10 minutes, to be honest, to set up an oSnap module and connect it to your snapshot space. Like it's incredibly easy to set up, but it's going to take like a month to kind of go through, like, you know, talking it through with the DAO, making sure everybody's comfortable with it. It's a major, you know, kind of governance component. So you want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with it.
Yeah. That the demo video you did was like spot on, very easy to follow and easy to integrate. But I can understand how like the DAO would need, it would just take some time to like incorporate it into the cycle of how a vote would pass and a transaction would be made through the safe.
Yeah, and I think that also a lot of people don't pay as close attention to snapshot as they should, because snapshot is just not enforceable. Like if a bad vote sneaks through snapshot, it sort of doesn't matter in a lot of cases, because the multi-sig can just be like, I'm not going to do that. oSnap kind of changes that. So, you know, it's kind of a culture shift too, because the snapshot votes matter now. Like they're enforceable. You need to pay attention.
That could help the voter participation that Andy was talking about earlier, because now people kind of have to pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. And like they feel empowered, because right now you go to snapshot and you vote and you're like, okay, I mean, I express my opinion, but like we'll see what the multi-sig signers really think. And sometimes they ignore what happens on snapshot. That's happened in the past and hugely controversial cases.
Yeah. Well, John, I mean, this was an absolute pleasure. That's about all I got. Andy, you know, what have you got?
Yeah, that's good. No, I mean, another use case that I just think of is just any disputes, like you guys kind of touched on. There's so many, from like merchant to buyer, and you know, insurance, debt collection, court case. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So, yeah, the use cases are very unlimited, and it's exciting. And then specifically for DeFi and for governance usages, oSnap seems to be kind of a step in the right direction for a lot of protocols. And yeah, it just makes things more seamless and easier, and also kind of aligns with the permissionless kind of vibe of DeFi. Just kind of things happen because they're hard coded in, code is law type of sentiment, which yeah, it has a lot of good benefits. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on, John, and sharing what you guys are building, and I wish you the best of luck. It sounds great so far, and user of across over here, and excited for the updates.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And definitely reach out about any other like integrations that you want to do. That is 𝗏's greatest challenge, is you can use it for so many things that we just want to like hear from other people. What do they want to use it for, and how do we support those teams? So definitely ping me on Twitter at @JDShutt if you're working on 𝗏 or interested in it. And we can connect you with the right people and get you some engineering support.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.